There are moments in life when the only way forward is through silence, when walking away is not an act of weakness, but the beginning of wisdom. And yet there are other moments, those rare, sharp-edged ones, when letting go is not the answer, when forgiveness is not the higher ground, but a doorway to self-neglect. These are the moments where holding on to truth, to pain, to the clarity that has emerged from chaos is the most sacred choice you can make. Some actions are not misunderstandings. They are not simple mistakes or missteps of the human condition. They are conscious decisions that wound the soul and fracture the foundation of your spirit. And while spiritual teachings often whisper about forgiveness as a path to peace, they also speak of discernment, of fierce compassion, and of the courage it takes to protect your own light from those who only seek to dim it. Because when someone betrays your trust not once, but repeatedly, when they make breaking promises a rhythm, a cycle, they are not confused. They are choosing themselves at the expense of your peace. And no matter how often they smile or how sweetly they speak of change, the truth lies in their actions. Trust is not just given, it is earned, brick by brick, through the honesty of time and consistency. It is a sacred bond between hearts. And when someone breaks that bond again and again, it becomes less about them and more about you. What you are willing to tolerate, what you are willing to lose to keep someone close. In the quiet places of your soul, you know this, that compassion does not mean returning to the same wound, hoping it will not cut you this time. Compassion means stepping back, not with hate, but with clarity. Wishing them peace, yes. Holding no anger, yes. But closing the door they so often use to walk in and cause harm. You are not cruel for refusing to reopen it. You are not unkind for protecting yourself. You are wise, and wisdom is often the quieter sibling of love, standing in the background, watching, waiting, ready to lead you when love has lost its way. And when the wounds go deeper, when they are not just of betrayal but of harm, of abuse, of bruises that don't just live on skin, but in the corners of your memory, then the call to refuse forgiveness becomes louder, stronger, clearer. Because abuse is not a misunderstanding. It is not love stretched too far. It is fear wearing the mask of control. It is power taken where tenderness should live. And no matter how many tears are shed, no matter how many times apologies are whispered in the dark, the body remembers. The soul remembers, and so must you. There is no spiritual reward in welcoming pain dressed in promises, no moral high ground in allowing your heart to be beaten in the name of compassion. You are not here to suffer for someone else's lessons. You are not here to be the canvas on which another person paints their unhealed wounds. Your safety is sacred, your peace is sacred, and your refusal to forgive. The one who repeatedly harms you is not heartlessness. It is sacred self-preservation. You can let go of the blame, you can drop the bitterness, but you are not required to forgive in a way that makes space for the cycle to begin again. Forgiveness can live quietly in your heart without returning, without calling, without ever opening the door again. And this is not just true for yourself, it is true for others, especially the vulnerable, the ones whose voices are small or silent, the ones who trust the world with open hands. When someone harms a child, when innocence is shattered by cruelty, the damage is not just in the moment, it is in the lifetime that follows, in the fears that linger, in the trust that breaks before it even has a chance to grow. And in these cases, forgiveness is not the answer, because when we forgive those who harm the innocent too easily, we become silent allies to their destruction. Children cannot protect themselves. That is why the universe made adults. That is why the soul grows stronger with age, not for dominance, but for defense. And to look away, to offer forgiveness without justice, without distance, without truth, is to fail them. It is to let harm echo into the future, untouched, unchecked. The child who was wounded may grow up, but the child within them remembers. And you, the witness, the protector, must remember too. This is not about vengeance. This is about never allowing darkness to feel at home in the places where innocence should thrive. Forgiveness does not erase responsibility. It does not restore what has been taken, and some things once taken cannot be returned. When someone chooses to harm a child, they choose to step away from humanity. And your refusal to forgive them is not a lack of compassion. It is the highest act of it, because it means you are standing in the place where justice, protection, and truth meet. It means you have chosen to love the future more than the comfort of false peace. And that is no small thing. There's a certain silence that settles in your soul after betrayal, an eerie stillness where your mind replays every word, every smile, every assurance that was meant to comfort you but now feels like a dagger turned sideways in your heart. Those who abuse trust don't just break a promise, they fracture your sense of safety. And when that fracture becomes a pattern, it becomes a warning that some people will continue to use your grace as a doorway to more damage. Repeated betrayal is never accidental. It is chosen, it is rehearsed. It is crafted carefully to push your boundaries while disguising itself as a moment of weakness. But you must understand that weakness does not return with a polished excuse. Weakness doesn't have a rehearsed apology. Weakness doesn't smile as it breaks your heart for the 5th time. What you're witnessing is not a struggle, it's strategy. Forgiveness in this context is not compassion. It's an invitation to repeat the pain. That doesn't mean you carry, had the purest minds, the most sacred trust given to us. Children do not know defense, they only know dependence. And when someone takes advantage of that, they do not merely harm a person, they corrupt a future. No path of peace, no spiritual teaching, no philosophical reflection asks you to forgive the destroyer of innocence easily. This is not a matter of letting go. This is a matter of standing up. The wound carved into a child by cruelty does not fade. It echoes into their adulthood. It shows up in their silence, in their mistrust, in their inability to see themselves as worthy of love. When you see someone harming a child, emotionally, physically, or in any manipulative form, do not let forgiveness be your first response. Let protection be, let justice be, let unwavering clarity be. Because to forgive this too soon is to minimize the damage, and that is not compassion, it is betrayal in disguise. Let them face the consequence. Let them bear the full weight of what they've done. Your kindness is not a shelter for predators. Your peace should not be paved over the shattered spirit of a child. Stand for the voiceless. Speak for those still learning to speak. Do not let your gentle heart become a shield for the wicked. Some wounds cry not for forgiveness, but for justice. And in those moments, silence is not peace, it is complicity. Refuse it. And then there are those who do not even carry the decency to feel remorse. These are people who hurt you and stare blankly back when confronted with your pain. People who respond to your tears with indifference, to your questions with coldness, to your suffering with excuses. Remorse is the first light of redemption. It is proof that someone is at least aware they've caused harm. But when remorse is missing, when their voice never trembles and their gaze never falls, you are looking not at a human in regret, but at a soul hardened against accountability. Forgiving someone who does not feel guilt is like planting seeds in concrete. You will get nothing but frustration and emptiness, and you will keep giving more of yourself, hoping they will eventually water the relationship, not realizing you are the only one holding the watering can. Stop trying to redeem someone who doesn't even see a reason to change. This is not your purpose. You are not here to fix those who choose not to be fixed. Your mission is not to become a martyr for their learning. Let them feel the full silence of your absence. Let them taste the coldness they once offered. Forgiveness is not deserved by all, especially not by those who feel no sorrow in the damage they've caused. Let them walk their path, and you walk yours. A path where peace is no longer interrupted by unrepentant souls. Some people don't come back to say sorry because they never felt they did anything wrong. They disappear, leaving a storm behind, and walk away as if the mess they made is just another page in someone else's story. And when you wait, hoping for a moment of clarity, a whisper of regret, a sign that they see what they've done, all you receive is silence. That silence can be louder than any scream. It tells you everything you need to know, not just about their character, but about how little your pain meant in the world they live in. There's a unique kind of grief that comes when the apology never arrives. It leaves you spinning, not just from what happened, but from what never happened. The ownership, the repair, the acknowledgement. But here's what you must understand. Closure is not a gift they give you. It's a decision you give yourself. Waiting for an apology that will never come is like drinking poison and hoping they'll feel the pain. You have to choose to walk away without their words. You have to accept that their silence is an answer, not the one you wanted, but the one that reveals more than any excuse ever could. And the longer you wait for them to validate your suffering, the more you betray your own healing. You don't need their regret to validate your experience. You don't need their remorse to justify your emotions. What you felt was real. What you endured was heavy. And the absence of their apology doesn't lessen the weight of your truth. Let it be enough that you survived. Let it be enough that you're still standing. Sometimes survival is your victory, and moving on without closure is your strength. Then there are the ones who apologize, not because they're sorry, but because they fear the consequences of their actions. These are the people who wear regret as a mask to avoid losing access to your heart. They'll say, "I'm sorry," with practiced sincerity, with just enough tears to make you pause. But underneath, there's no shift in behavior, no internal reckoning, no desire to change. Their apology is a strategy, not a revelation. And when you look closely, you'll see the cracks. You'll hear it in the way they say, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," instead of "I hurt you." You'll feel it in the way they expect instant forgiveness, as if your pain is an inconvenience in the way of their comfort. Real remorse is slow. It doesn't rush the process. It doesn't pressure the wounded to move on. It sits in the discomfort. It listens. It changes. It stays changed. So when someone rushes your forgiveness, when they treat your healing as a deadline instead of a journey, remember this: you are not obligated to accept an apology that is not rooted in transformation. A sorry without change is just manipulation. Don't be fooled by tears that dry too quickly or promises that fade with convenience. You can acknowledge their words without reopening the door. You can hear their voice without letting them back into your life. Healing is not just about what they say, it's about what you allow. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is hear the apology and still walk away. And perhaps the hardest thing to accept is when the people who hurt you are the ones who were supposed to love you unconditionally. Family, friends you called your own, the ones who sat beside you during your brightest days and darkest hours, until the day they didn't. There's a unique sting that comes when the betrayal is close, because with strangers, you expect distance, but with loved ones, you expect safety. And when they break that sacred trust, it doesn't just shake your faith in them, it shakes your faith in love itself. You begin to question everything. Was any of it real? Did they ever mean the kind words? Were the memories built on anything true? And that doubt becomes a shadow that follows you into every new relationship. Forgiving family is especially hard because society whispers constantly in your ear. But they're your blood. Family is everything. You only get one mother. You only get one sibling. But let me tell you this, blood is not a free pass. DNA is not an excuse. And family is not defined by who shares your last name. It's defined by who shows up with consistency, with love, with respect. If someone treats you poorly, manipulates you, demeans you, disrespects your boundaries, or gaslights your pain, their title does not make it acceptable. You have every right to step back. You have every right to cut ties. You have every right to protect your peace, even if it means distancing yourself from people who share your childhood. Forgiveness in these cases doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means accepting that they may never change, and you must love them from a distance. Sometimes it means grieving the family you wanted and building the one you deserve. And that's not weakness, that's wisdom. There's also the guilt you feel when you don't forgive, especially if you're someone who was taught that kindness means endless understanding, that love is supposed to endure all things, that letting go of resentment is a moral duty. You're told that carrying anger is toxic, that forgiveness is freedom. And yes, in many cases, that is beautifully true, but not always. Some people weaponize your spiritual beliefs against you. They tell you, if you were really spiritual, you would forgive. Or, you're still angry, that means you haven't healed. But those are manipulations wrapped in moral language. Forgiveness is not proof of your purity. Boundaries are not proof of your brokenness. You can be fully healed and still choose never to reconcile. You can be deeply spiritual and still feel rage at injustice. Holding someone accountable is not bitterness, it's maturity. You don't owe anyone your peace if they're the ones who shattered it. You can wish someone well and still never want them near your life again. Forgiveness is not a rule, it's a right. And rights are yours to use, not to be forced into. So if you're not ready to forgive, that's okay. And if you never reach that point, that's okay too. You are not less loving, less evolved, or less whole. You are human, and healing is not a race to forgiveness. It's a return to your wholeness, on your own terms. There's something deeply unsettling about the apologies that come years later, long after the damage has been done. They arrive like faded postcards from a place you no longer recognize, addressed to a version of yourself that doesn't live there anymore. Maybe the person who hurt you suddenly reaches out, after the dust has long settled, after you've rebuilt your life brick by trembling brick, offering a few regretful words as if those syllables could reverse time. They say they've changed, they say they see things clearly now, and maybe they do. But what they don't see, or perhaps refuse to see, is the way their absence during your worst moments forced you to face battles you should have never fought alone. They weren't there when you cried yourself to sleep. They weren't there when you doubted your worth, when you questioned your sanity, when you wondered what you did to deserve such silence. And now when the wounds have scarred over, when you've stitched yourself back together in solitude, they return with words that feel too little, too late. Not because people can't change, not because they don't mean it, but because sometimes healing isn't compatible with reopening the past. You're no longer that version of yourself who needed their apology like oxygen. You're someone else now. Someone who survived, someone who grew, someone who learned that closure isn't a door they hold, it's a path you build. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to acknowledge their apology, feel the closure you never thought you'd get, and still walk away with your head high and your heart guarded. And maybe one of the most painful realizations is this. Some people are sorry, but only for themselves. They're not sorry they hurt you. They're sorry you reacted. They're not sorry they betrayed your trust. They're sorry they lost access to your energy. Their apology is a reflection of their discomfort, not your pain. And you can feel it. You can feel the way their words orbit around their needs, their guilt, their redemption. They'll say things like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," instead of, "I see how I hurt you," or "I didn't mean to," as if intention somehow erases impact. They want forgiveness because it soothes their conscience, not because they truly understand the depth of what they did. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself performing forgiveness just to make them feel better, just to end the conversation, just to be the bigger person. But healing is not a stage, and you are not a performer. You do not owe anyone your forgiveness if their apology is simply a plea for relief. You are not responsible for carrying their guilt. You have every right to protect the sacredness of your healing, and you don't have to explain why. You don't have to justify your boundaries, your silence, your distance. Some apologies are more about them than they are about you, and that alone is reason enough to walk away. Sometimes, the absence of an apology doesn't come from malice, but from fear. There are people who know they broke something delicate in you, and the weight of that truth is so unbearable that they'd rather disappear than face it. Their silence is not ignorance, it's avoidance. They know. Deep down, they know. But facing you means facing themselves. And that kind of self-reflection requires courage they haven't yet cultivated. It's easier for them to pretend nothing happened, to convince themselves that time has healed all wounds, to tell mutual friends, "I hope they're doing well," as if that sentiment can substitute for ownership. And maybe they even convince themselves that you wouldn't want to hear from them anyway. So they say nothing, they do nothing. They vanish into the background of your life like a ghost that never quite fades. But here's the truth they never say. Their silence is not your fault. Their avoidance is not proof that you were too sensitive or too emotional or too broken to handle a conversation. It's proof of their own inability to show up with maturity and integrity. Don't internalize their absence. Don't let their silence rewrite your worth. You deserved an apology. You deserved accountability. You deserved presence. And the fact that they couldn't provide it is a reflection of their limitations, not yours. And then there's the moment, often unexpected, when you realize that you'd been waiting so long for someone else to make things right, that you forgot you could give yourself that power. It starts small. Maybe you catch yourself breathing a little easier when you think of them. Maybe the sting of their name starts to fade. Maybe you no longer feel the urge to explain your side of the story to anyone who will listen. And that shift is sacred. It's the beginning of self-forgiveness. Because what no one tells you is that sometimes the person you need to forgive most is yourself. Not for what you did, but for what you tolerated. For the times you stayed too long. For the times you silenced your needs to keep the peace. For the moments you believed their version of you over your own. And that guilt can run deep. You wonder why you didn't walk away sooner, why you gave so many chances, why you didn't see the red flags waving in front of your face. But guilt is not a teacher, it's a jailer, and you don't need to stay locked inside its walls. You were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. You were surviving, loving, hoping, and those aren't flaws, they're signs of a deeply human heart. So let yourself off the hook. You don't need to keep punishing yourself for the kindness you gave. You don't need to wear your past like a scarlet letter. You can forgive yourself. Not because you were wrong, but because you were learning. And growth always deserves grace. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you finally feel the weight lift. You don't notice it right away. Maybe it's in the way your chest doesn't tighten when you hear their name, or the way your voice no longer cracks when you retell the story. Maybe it's in the way you no longer feel the need to be understood, defended, or vindicated. That's the power of healing. It's not loud. It doesn't always come with a big revelation or a cinematic closure. Often, it's just a whisper in your soul that says, "I'm okay now." You realize that the person who hurt you no longer has the same hold over you, not because what they did was small, but because you've grown larger than the pain. You've outlived the betrayal. You've evolved beyond the version of yourself that once felt stuck in their orbit. And it's not because they apologized. It's not because they came back and finally said the right words. It's because you stopped waiting. You stopped needing their closure to build your freedom. You stopped placing your peace in the hands of someone who dropped it so carelessly. And that realization, it's not just healing, it's power. Quiet, sacred, transformative power. The kind that reshapes how you love, how you trust, and most importantly, how you see yourself. And here's what they never tell you about healing. It's lonely. Not because you're alone, but because no one else can fully understand the magnitude of what you've survived. You walk through life with a smile that hides entire wars. You laugh with people who have no idea that the sound of your joy was once buried beneath years of silence. You extend kindness to strangers even though your own kindness was once weaponized against you. And in that loneliness, there's a strange kind of beauty, a fierce independence that wasn't chosen but earned. You learn to cherish your own company. You learn to find peace in solitude. You learn that your own voice, once ignored, is the one worth listening to most. Healing teaches you who you are when no one else is watching. And what you find is someone resilient, someone tender, someone incredibly strong. Not because life made you that way, but because you refused to let it break you permanently. You rose, again and again, and in that rising, you became your own sanctuary. There's a subtle power in no longer needing revenge, in no longer fantasizing about proving them wrong or making them feel what you felt. That shift doesn't come because the pain was small. It comes because your growth became more important than your resentment. You no longer need them to understand the damage they caused. You no longer crave their recognition. Because now, you see the value in your own experience, regardless of whether or not they ever do. That's the kind of peace that can't be faked. It's a peace that comes from staring down the darkest parts of your story and saying, yes, that happened, and I am still here. It's a peace that doesn't require you to forget. It just invites you to stop bleeding, to stop reopening wounds to prove that they're real, to stop explaining your pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. This peace, not about erasure, it's about release. And you deserve to live in that release. Not someday, not when they say sorry, but now. Because healing isn't a gift they give you. It's one you give yourself. And perhaps the most profound truth of all is this. Forgiveness doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like walking away with grace, like choosing to love them from a distance or not at all, like letting go of the hope that they'll ever be the person you needed them to be. And that doesn't make you bitter. It doesn't make you closed off. It makes you wise. It means you understand that love without accountability is not love, it's illusion. It means you know that boundaries are not barriers, they're bridges to self-respect. It means you've realized that the most radical act of love is choosing yourself, even when it hurts. Because you know now, you are not too much. You are not too emotional. You are not hard to love. You are simply someone who deserves care that doesn't come at the cost of your peace. And if someone can't offer that, it's not your job to shrink until they can hold you. It's your right to stand tall and walk away. So if no one has told you this before, let me be the one who does. You didn't imagine it. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't overreacting. What happened to you was real. The pain was real. The confusion, the betrayal, the silence, all of it mattered. And it's okay if you're still carrying pieces of it. Healing is not a straight line. It's not a deadline. It's a dance between hurting and hoping, between remembering and releasing, between grieving what could have been and embracing what is. And in that dance, you become someone else, someone softer but stronger, someone wiser but not jaded, someone who has seen the worst in people and still chooses to believe in the good. And that, more than anything, is your strength. Not that you were never broken, but that you broke and built something beautiful with the pieces. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than forgiveness, when walking away is more powerful than offering a second chance. One of those moments is when someone causes the ultimate harm, when a life is lost at their hands, whether by deliberate violence, reckless negligence, or heartless selfishness, and they show no remorse. The weight of such an action is beyond comprehension. And when that sanctity is broken without acknowledgement or accountability, it is not your duty to restore what they have shattered. Forgiveness, in such cases, is not your burden to bear. It comes from truth, from letting go of false expectations, from understanding that some acts echo too loudly to be drowned in mercy. Let them carry their burden. Let your healing be sacred, untouched by their refusal to change. And when guilt or confusion whispers to your soul, remember this: your heart is not a courtroom, and forgiveness is not owed to those who refuse to seek it with humility.